Alex Fennelly, and today I am going to be deconstructing a recipe for you. So Amy is an employee at The Wellness Way, and she has had a very, very long health journey, and Christy and I want to support her in this health journey and bring some of her favorite recipes that she had growing up. We want to deconstruct these recipes and give her some healthier options so she still has the comfort of home during her Wellness Way journey, but can stay on track for her health goals. So she gave us a list of recipes that Christy and I got to choose from, and Christy chose to do a sweet blueberry pie with a chickpea pie crust, and I am going to be deconstructing a pasty recipe for her using that same chickpea pie crust. It's really fulfilling for me to be able to do this pasty recipe because although I live in Montana now, I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And if you've ever been there, you know that there is a pasty store on every single corner of every little town that exists in the UP. So I grew up on pasties. I'm really familiar with this. One thing that with pasties, when you are trying to do them gluten-free, it is definitely a challenge in and of itself. So with this chickpea recipe, the dough is very, very delicate, or the pie crust is very, very delicate. So rather than doing a pasty itself, we are choosing to do all of the same ingredients, but just making a pie out of it instead. So that's what we're going to do today. So we will start with the flour. First, I'm going to do 3 cups of flour. So we're going to do 3 cups of flour to start. I'm going to mix all of the flour, the salt, and the powdered xylitol into a bowl, and then we are going to sift all that ingredients together. The sifting just helps really meld everything and evenly mix it. So again, 3 cups of this chickpea flour. You would never know the difference until you tasted this, that this wasn't typical wheat flour. So now I'm going to add in, again, that was 3 cups. I'm going to add in 1 teaspoon of salt and then 2 teaspoons of powdered xylitol. Typically, xylitol comes in granules, so the best way to powder this, to make powdered sugar, is you can put it in a food processor, but if you don't need that much, honestly, the best way to do that is with a coffee grinder. So I'm going to mix these together, and then we're going to put this into the sifter and just sift them together here. So you just want to mix this evenly, kind of spread it about in this bowl here. Do it as fast as possible. Sometimes if you tap on the other end, you can make it go a little bit faster. Fill it up again. So again, the sifting of this just allows everything to mix evenly, those 3 simple ingredients, but that powdered xylitol can tend to be a little bit sticky or chunky, if you will. And again, this will just spread all of that out very evenly. I will have you know that I am not a big baker, so if I am able to navigate this very delicate chickpea pie crust, you can do this too. Okay, so now that that is basically sifted together, we will move that over here. Now I'm going to add in these chilled beef tallow tablespoons. So total there's 16 of them. Okay, so now we're gonna add in the 16 tablespoons of the chilled tallow right into this dough. So I'm just gonna pick them, plop them in here, and then we are going to use a pastry blender, a handheld one, to weave these bits of tallow in here. You can certainly use a food processor for this step, but I find that you're not gonna get a nice flaky crust if you over mix it. You still want those pea-sized pieces of the tallow to be in here. So if you over mix it with a food processor, you're just not gonna get the nice flaky texture that you want out of this. So you're just gonna blend these in, meld them into the just keep mixing it and working them in, chopping them up. Ever so often, just use a spoon or a knife to get these out of here. And again, as you're breaking these apart, what you're ideally looking for is pea-sized pieces of the tallow and kind of mixed evenly throughout the flour. A little bit more of a tedious process using the pastry blender like this, but again, it'll pay off in the long run when you have the texture that you want once it's baked. We'll just do a little bit more, and then we're going to add in a couple of tablespoons of chilled water. So I've had water sitting here with some ice cubes in it. Okay, so now that that's mixed nice and evenly, we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of chilled water, and we're just going to see what this does to the dough as we mix it with our hands. Kind of mix it together here. If it's dry, you can add a little bit more of the water, and if it's too wet, you just simply add a little bit more flour. But we just want to bring this together here. Okay, I'm going to add just a little bit more water to this. You can always add more. And you can add more flour too, but it's easier if you just take it slow with the water. And I'm just going to keep going with this. Again, what you're looking for is simply for this dough to come together. And then once it does, we'll make discs and we'll put it in the fridge. And chill it. So this one is needing way more water than I typically used, but again, just what it needs today, which is perfectly fine. Okay. that should do it. Okay, so now I'm just gonna make sure this is nice and put together, and we'll get some you kind of want the discs to be the same size. So we'll get the balls out, we'll form them, and then I'll make sure that they're the same size so that when we roll them, just makes that step a lot easier. So you can see the difference if you've worked with flour crust before. This is a very different texture. You just have to be patient with it and continue to work with it. Give yourself grace in the process. Again, I am not a baker, so if I can do this, you can do this. Okay, so now that we've got our balls, we just want to make sure that everything is nice and even. We don't want a lot of pockets in there. This one into a ball. If one is a little bit bigger than the other, I tend to try to use that ball or disc as the bottom crust, and then I try to use the smaller one for the top. Okay, so now I'm just going to simply get some plastic wrap out. I preheated the oven to 350. When you are using quote unquote less toxic plastic wrap, it just doesn't work as well as the good stuff. Okay, so now we've got our balls. I'm just gonna form this into just a little bit of a disc here. Try to keep everything together. Again, don't get frustrated if it gets kind of flaky or breaks apart. That is just the nature of this, and we just have to work with it. So another plastic wrap here. Okay, putting this into a disc again, trying to keep it together. And we're just gonna put this in the fridge and chill it for about a half hour. Put these together. Okay, so as the dough is chilling, what I'm gonna do is prep all the inside ingredients. So I've got some ground beef here, and I seasoned it with some garlic salt. I'm gonna cut up 2 carrots and 2 potatoes. Carrots are typically not something that I would put in my pasties, but this is part of Amy's family recipe, so we're gonna add those in. When you compare the carrots to the potatoes are gonna cook a lot faster than the carrots are. So you wanna keep that in mind when you're chopping. So the carrots are gonna be about half the size of the potatoes, and even with that, I tend to make the potatoes pretty small because the meat is gonna cook fast, and you wanna make sure that the potatoes and the carrots are on par with that. Otherwise, you'll have overcooked meat. So very small, just dice up tiny little, less than bite-sized pieces of the carrots. And I'm just gonna put those into a bowl so that when we're ready to add the filling, we can do that. So again, really making sure that we're getting these carrot slices or chunks nice and small here. You can even shred them if you wanted to. That would always be a really good option. So you'll still get that flavor, but they'll definitely cook more efficiently. Some other ingredients that people commonly add into pasties would be rutabagas. I'm not adding those in. They were in Amy's family recipe. I'm not adding those in today because I couldn't find any organic ones. So, and again, when it comes to pasties, there's definitely options at the pasty shops now that gluten-free is in such demand. You can definitely get gluten-free pasties at the shops, but then again, you never know the quality of the meat that you're going to be getting, and you certainly can assume that the inside, the vegetables and the potatoes and whatnot are not going to be organic. So just offers another reason to recreate this at home. Typically, how you eat your pasty is a very personal thing in the UP. I like to have mine with ketchup. Some people like theirs with mustard. Some people just like theirs with plain salt. Everybody's different, and it's a very, it's a religion there, if you will. Amy cannot have tomatoes according to her food allergy list. So when we serve this to her at the cookbook launch, we are going to make a no-mato ketchup so that she can try it with that. I added 2 potatoes, just smaller potatoes. You can use any kind of potatoes that you want. I always leave the skins on of my potatoes and my carrots, just my preference. You can easily wash and peel the skins off if you wanted to, but I always just leave mine on. I can't tell the difference. And okay, so now that I have that, I'm just gonna get an onion. Let's see how long it takes me to cry. Peel this outer layer off, and then we'll get this chopped and we will start rolling our dough. See how that goes for us. Christy and I always like to remind people that we are just moms who have learned to cook according to this wellness way lifestyle. We are not culinary trained. So again, my terminology might be off, the way I cut things might be off. So we're just gonna do a half of an onion. You can do a whole if you wanted to. It's just, again, personal preference. If you like more meat in your pasty, you can add more meat. If you like more potatoes, again, have fun with it. There's no rhyme or reason. The amount of what you put inside is completely dependent on your preferences. If you didn't want to do potatoes, if you wanted a lower sugar option, you could always do radishes. Radishes, raw, have a bite to them. They're very spicy, but once you cook or bake them, it kind of takes that bite out of it. So that would be a good lower sugar option for you. So now I'm going to get the crust out of the fridge here, the dough. And we're going to see what this does. So I like to use parchment paper on the bottom. When you are working with normal wheat dough, you can just put some flour down on your countertop and simply roll that out. It's not that easy with these more delicate gluten-free, or specifically this chickpea crust. So I always lay out parchment paper and then put some flour on top of that. I know that Christy, she has granite countertop, so she just does another layer of plastic wrap on the bottom, plastic wrap on the top. With my concrete countertops, it doesn't stick as well. So I just use parchment on the bottom, and then I continue to use the plastic on top. That way, as I'm rolling this dough out, you can really see what it's doing underneath. So we're gonna lift this off here. And I am gonna put some flour on top of this, just to kind of help us a little bit. And you're not going to be able to roll this like you would typical dough. There's a little bit of a technique to it, if you will. So I'm gonna kind of punch that down a little bit. We're gonna put our plastic wrap over top. And again, this is gonna flake apart. If it does, that's okay. We're just gonna smush it together as needed. And that's kind of what you're gonna have to do when you start putting it in the pan as well. So to start, I can already see that this is starting to kind of crumble more than it typically does. So I'm just gonna have a little bit of water on hand and kind of just baby this a little bit here. So okay, and again, as you're rolling this, you're not going to be able to grab the handles and just simply roll like you would be able to wheat flour. You're really just going to put some pressure on the middle here, and you're just going to guide it in different directions. And just working to flatten it out. Again, it's really gonna crumble on the edges, that's okay. You're kind of gonna put a puzzle together when we're putting it in the pan. And you're just gonna piece it together. Okay, so we're gonna roll this next one out here. See how this one does for us. And just turning it, bringing it gently in different directions. Putting a decent amount of pressure on it so you actually get it to spread out, but you don't want to force it because then it tends to crumble more. And this one's doing better than the last one, but it's definitely wanting to crumble. The one that stays together the most is, again, typically the one that I use for the top, just because it's easier to kind of flop on once you've got your filling in there. And it's easier to piece together the bottom one like a bit of a puzzle. And I probably could have let this chill a little bit longer and it would have been easier to work with, but so again, you just keep turning and then no different than you would with any other kind of pie crust. You take your pan and you just give it a little overlook and see if you've got the size right. That looks great. So I'm going to put this aside, and I'm going to grab this sassy one, and we are going to use this as the bottom and piece this into the pan. Okay, so I find that it's easiest if we're going to put it in the pan to take that plastic wrap off. And you're just going to grab it and flip it around. And again, if it crumbles, that's okay, like this did. We want to piece it together like a puzzle. And you're just going to kind of smash them in. If you're having this problem over and over, if you do chill the dough longer, you're going to have some better success with this. And then again, for whatever reason, even though I added more water than I typically do, this one appears to have needed a little bit more. So again, when you're trying to bake gluten-free, there's always trial and error with this. So piecing this all together, and then what you can also do is take these edges that are kind of hanging off and grab them and piece them in. Okay. And this is not necessarily going to cut like your normal pie either. That's why you are able to piece this together. Okay, so now we are going to add in our filling. So I always start with a little bit of salt on the bottom. And then I like to put the ground beef at the bottom just to ensure that it's going to cook really well. You're definitely going to layer this, but I always typically start with some beef. And there's no rhyme or reason. You're just pulling this apart and putting chunks in, if you will. Okay, so now we're gonna do some potato, layer some onions and carrots in there. It's really easy to get the onions and carrots into the little crevices. So kind of work those around, then do another layer of meat. I like to get them no different than the bottom. I like to get the meat on the outer edges as well. That way, if you want to check to see if your pie is done, you can also open up a side of it just to make sure that the meat is cooked through, and check potato and see if they're nice and soft. So again, I just simply seasoned this meat with garlic salt. You can use any kind of seasoning that you want to. Typically, pasties are pretty bland by nature, but again, you can doctor them up to your own personal preference. And then I just do a layer of meat over the top. Again, it'll cook really well. And then putting the rest of everything else in here. The rest of the potatoes in. And now we are going to take this top crust, see how it works for us. You can do another layer of salt if you wanted to. We're just gonna get the crust on here and get this in the oven. Okay, so with this top crust, I've already got some that's peeling off here. We are just going to ever so lovingly. So normally with your wheat flour, you're going to be able to fold this over and really work with it. Again, this is so delicate. You just don't have that luxury, if you will. So I'm going to pull these off so I can piece them together, and I am just going to plop this lovingly on top. You're not going to be able to flute the edges typically like you would be able to with a normal pie crust either. So we're just going to give this a really organic look to it. You kind of want to close it off a little bit, but again, you're not going to have the working texture that you would need to actually flute this. If you wanted to, depending on food allergies too, you can always do like an egg wash over the top of this to give it some good color. I can't do that. Amy has a chicken egg allergy, and I do not have any duck eggs on hand. So we're gonna go without the egg wash, but know that that's always an option for you. That's pretty typical when making pasties. So again, you just kind of want to take all these puzzle pieces and meld them together. And again, this is what's going to offer that nice, crispy, flaky crust. And then I just simply take a knife. You can do whatever design on top you want. I typically, halfway through baking, I put, you can do tin foil on the outer edges. With the tin foil, I always like to make sure that the tin foil is not actually touching the pie crust. But you have less toxic options. I know that Christy has a silicone border that she puts on the outside. I've also seen some stainless steel little caps that you can put on top of this as well. So typically I just let it bake like this for half of the baking time, and then I will go on and put the edge protector so that these don't, your edges don't burn. This one's kind of tucked in there, so they're a little bit more protected, but we'll get this in the oven. So we're baking that at 350. Typically it takes about an hour, give or take 15 minutes, just depending on the size of your meat chunks and how much filling you have on the inside, and then also the size of your potatoes and carrots. So at our official book launch for the book, Cookbook from Scratch, we will be presenting these two sweet and savory pies to Amy live on Dr. Patrick's ADP show.
Okay. You get to try it.
I get to try it. Let me just say, it smells like heaven. It's amazing. Oh my, brings me back to home.
Oh. It's definitely a delicate crust.
It is a
Yes,
delicate
very
crust.
delicate crust. These typically won't cut like actual pie pieces. They're not as put together.
Oh, it tastes amazing.
Oh, good.
It tastes amazing.